welcome back to another episode of Tween Book Bites here at the Scott County Public Library in Georgetown, Kentucky, with me, Kelly, and Miss Mary Lou over here.
Hello.
So it's March, and that means it's Women's History Month.
Yes.
I got super excited about that. I
know, but also, it's also, by the time you watch this, it's almost St. Patrick's Day, and our flamingos are celebrating already.
Yeah, I don't know if you all noticed, but we like to deck them out because we think it's really funny.
and now Kelly, I should be able to pinch her because she doesn't have her green, but I do
well,
have my rainbow socks and my green sweater. Because
it's not actually St. Patrick's Day.
No, but it's close, and I'm excited about it. Because, we need to celebrate. We got our second COVID vaccines today. We're really happy. So.
Which means that next time, we don't have to wear masks.
That's right.
Yeah. That's exciting.
All right.
So Women's History Month.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got lots of books. A fair amount of them are nonfiction this time.
Yes, I was going to say we're going to break it into two categories. We're going to talk about some nonfiction books that are about women's history.
Yeah.
And some historical characters. And then we're going to talk about, I've got a stack of novels here that I'm going to go through very quickly that feature really strong, heroic female characters that really are inspiring. So
I've only got one fiction this time.
Yeah, so she's going to go heavy on the nonfiction.
Yeah.
Do you want to alternate? You want to do one first and then the other, or how do you want to do this, Kelly?
I don't care. I'm just going to start. We're going to talk about Princeless. I think I mentioned this before for maybe, I don't think it was Black History Month, but I think I've mentioned this before because Princeless is the greatest. This is the princess series that Disney wishes they were making. It is so good. Princess Adrienne has like a bunch of sisters, and all of them, when they reach a certain age, their father, the king, locks them away in their own individual tower with their own individual protector beast. And Adrienne is not having any of that, so she literally makes friends with her dragon named Sparky, and they escape. She saves herself. She don't need no prince. And so the rest of it follows her adventure. She's like, "No, I'm breaking my sisters out." And so as she goes on, it's great because some of the sisters are fine. They're like, "Nah, this is great. People don't bother me. I love it." And other sisters have already broken themselves out as well. And it's so good.
I think fantasy is really good about featuring very strong female characters as a place where you're just going to find rich female characters.
Yeah.
A piece of fiction I want to talk about, I think this is a good place for me to start. This is a classic, and the reason I want to talk about this book, it's interesting to compare this book to books that are coming out now that feature kind of girl, what you might want to call girl interest. This book is called Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and it was written by Judy Blume. This book was published in 1970. Now, I remember this book when my girls, I have 3 daughters, were growing up. It's 50 years old. It's published 51 years ago. And I had never read it. And I thought, well, we're doing women's history. I'm going to read this book. Because it was one of the early books that came out that really tried to capture what it was like for a girl coming of age and really zero in on things like body changes and, feelings about boys and understanding, relationships with other girls. And it is very, very zeroed in on that, which, when I read the book, it was groundbreaking in its time. And for me, even though it's a classic, it's still popular, it felt really dated. Because what you're going to find with the girl characters now that they have a world of interests and passions and hobbies. And they may have romantic interests, but they also want to play basketball, or they want to be astronauts, or, they have a world outside of trying to please their friends and please boys. So I like the way that particularly girl focused fiction has grown. But there was a passage in here I wanted to read. It's very short, and then I promise the next book talks are going to be much shorter. It's her birthday, Margaret's birthday, and she's really kind of gone through this year with this circle of friends that she has found out all kinds of things like how destructive gossip is, and that friends can lie to you. She's gotten her first period, she's gotten her first bra, she's had her first crush, all those things that have happened to her. But she's also going through some spiritual searching. Her parents have raised her with no religion. Her father's Jewish, her mother was raised in a conservative Christian home, And they decided to raise her with no religion, so she's fascinated by religion, and she's done a lot of exploring with that. But it's her birthday, and she's sitting in a circle in school with the most popular boy that all the girls have a crush on, named Philip. The first thing Philip did after we moved our desk together was sing to me. He sang, "Happy birthday to you, you live in a zoo, you look like a monkey, you smell like one too." And then he pinched me on the arm really hard, enough to make tears come to my eyes. He said, "That's a pinch to grow an inch, and you know where you need that inch."
Philip sounds like the worst.
I mean, you know, and I read another book recently, and I meant to book talk it last time because it was the Newbery Honor, called Fighting Words. And one of the things in that book, that the main character who's experienced abuse in learning how to stand up for herself in a healthy way, the boys go around snapping backs of girls to see if they're wearing a bra yet. And she learns how to stand up to that in a really effective way, and empowers her girlfriends to do the same. That we as girls know now, we women, we don't have to take this mess. This happened when I was a kid. We put up with it, which is, well, boys will be boys. And that's what you're going to feel in this book, because that's kind of how it's treated in this book. That's just how boys are.
Black.
And so that part, but anyway, it's a classic, and it was really important for its time. But these other books show us how much authors approach girlhood
Now.
Yes.
All right. I think next I will go with the one that I just finished yesterday. Well, it started and finished yesterday. It's not a long book. So this is Finish the Fight, The Brave and Revolutionary Women Who Fought for the Right to Vote, by Veronica Chambers and the staff of the New York Times. It is also gorgeously illustrated by, multiple people. Lots of people. That's why they didn't put it on the front cover. Okay. I see you, publisher. That's a lot of people. So it's about 10 chapters, I think. And we all know, I would argue, well, most of us know, like, the big names in Women's History Month, the people who got women the right to vote, except that's not all the story there is. And I love that this book also centers people of color, some of the African American suffragists, and indigenous women, and also a Chinese American woman, and it is so good. I learned stuff. If I talked about Lifting as We Climb, I think about a year ago now. It was also a Coretta Scott King honor book. I believe it was an honor book and not a winner, but it was one of the books. And this, I would say, is very similar, but also covers more different women, and is skews a little younger. So if you don't feel like you're ready for Lifting as We Climb yet, this is a fantastic resource. It is so good.
And we're going to talk about History Smashers in a minute.
Yeah.
When I'm going to book talk another book, and then when you're book talking, I left that in our office. I'm going to run get it.
Okay.
Because I want to show it.
Sure.
Are you done with that book?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's, yeah.
I'm going to do another novel. And I've got a lot of historical fiction here. Because I think historical fiction is important in looking at women's history, because it tells us what odds girls were up against during that time. But this one, Caddy Woodlong, and this is also a classic. This book was written, it's by Carol Ryrie Brink, and it was written in 1935. So this is an older book, but I love it. I loved the Little House books. But I think I love this book even more, just like I loved the Birch Bark House series. And Laura Ingalls Wilder inspired so many good stuff. But this Caddy Woodlong, her father and mother were homesteaders. Her mother had been a society lady in Boston when her husband got this thing that he just wanted to go out and homestead. So he packed up the family and moved them out into, it's been a while since I read it, I don't remember, somewhere out during this westward expansion of America, very close to indigenous tribes. There's a lot of conflict between the settlers and tribal people, of course, over land. Caddy comes from a big family. She has an older sister who is very much wanting to be a lady, and it's the mother and the sister trying to figure out how they can maintain some of this, you know, this properness out in this homesteading where they're having to, like, you know, work so hard just to survive. But she agrees to let the husband kind of take control of Caddy. And he raises Caddy, I won't say like a boy, but he gives her total freedom. She can ride horses, she can go barefoot back, she wears dresses, but she goes barefoot, and she's wild and free. And she develops a close relationship with some of the people from the Native American tribe close by. And in fact, at one point, there's almost a war, and Caddy is the one that goes in and brokers the relationship between the settlers and the Native Americans. But she's just a spitfire, and I love that about it. I love that, and it's based on the author's grandmother. So it is based on a true story, and it won the Newbery Gold Medal. It's beautifully written. Love this book. I'm going to get History Smashers while you talk about what's next.
Okay, I'm going to talk about astronauts, so you can talk about Mr. Sheinkin next.
Oh, yes.
Yes. All right. So I have got Astronauts, Women on the Final Frontier by Jim Ottaviani and Maris Wicks, who also did Primates. This is a nonfiction graphic novel, and it is all about women trying to get to space. Even today, not that many women have been in space. It's been mostly men, because, you know, of course it has. And I really liked that this book doesn't just talk about the American women, it also focuses a lot on the Russian cosmonauts, which is what they call astronauts in Russian. And also, yeah, men kind of were not great. At the very beginning of the book, we are introduced to, well, I think most of us know John Glenn, the famous astronaut, and in congressional hearings, he was pretty sexist. He did not have a particular degree that most NASA astronauts were required to have, and most of the women did not either. And when asked, he was like, "No, you shouldn't bend the rules for them." And then some of the women were like, "You mean like they did for you?" Excuse you. But that's even just the very beginning. And so there's a whole group of women, and they were all pilots originally, for the most part. I shouldn't say all. I believe they were mostly pilots. So they already had sort of a leg up, and they were all very well trained. They were all super smart, and they were from all sorts of different backgrounds. And it's great. And it follows it all the way up until mostly the present, I think, if I remember correctly. And also looking ahead to Mars, which makes sense. We just had another rover set down.
That's right.
A week or so ago, maybe. Yeah, within the last little bit. So really good astronauts, but women astronauts.
And so a precursor to that book would be Born to Fly. This is in our teen nonfiction area. It's a little bit longer, but I think some of you that don't mind a longer book, there's certainly nothing inappropriate for you. And it's written by Steve Sheinkin, who's my favorite nonfiction writer. I've just loved him.
Bajillion Award winner.
And his books just read more like a novel. He goes so deep into he finds these amazing tidbits of fascinating information that make the characters just alive off the page. And this book was partly inspired by his own daughter, who was Amelia Earhart, for Halloween one year. And he's got a picture of her dressed in her Halloween costume. But this covers the history of women's aviation beginning in the 1920s, when plane flight was new, and golly day, it was dangerous. So many pilots crashed and died because the planes were just, they basically were made out of wood and fabric with these gasoline engines that they had no covering over their heads. I didn't realize that the way they started the planes was by flipping the propellers, and rather than, I just thought that's just how they got the propellers going, but that's how they started the plane. And if you didn't move real fast, you'd get decapitated. Your head, So it was just, every aspect of it was really dangerous. So of course they didn't want women flying, because women shouldn't do anything dangerous. But these pilots that he develops in the course of this book he begins with their childhood, and many of them, from their very youngest age, were daredevils. They would jump off the roof of a barn with an umbrella. They wanted to fly so bad, and I think it was Amelia Earhart that she and her siblings took planks and made tracks off of the roof of a barn, and they got a box, and it was their roller coaster. And she got in that box and she flew, and of course the planks broke, and she went flying through the air. She landed, she was bloody, and her mother comes running out and she goes, "Oh, that was great!" There was nothing that could thwart these women's passion for flying, and that was from their very earliest childhood. That the risks of it, which were enormous then, did not deter them. And this book really focuses in on the first cross-country derby race. This was a common thing back then. These pilots would be a course across the country, and they would fly certain segments each day, and they kept time for each pilot, and the top pilot with the best time, of course, won. It was very dangerous. Usually there were multiple crashes and multiple people died during the course of these derbies. This is the first one for women. I believe it was 1928, and Amelia Earhart was one of the pilots. Probably the most significant pilot, this one right here, is Louise Baden. Most of us know Amelia Earhart. Most of us do not know her contribution to aviation. Her contribution to women in aviation was much more significant than Amelia Earhart, so somebody you should know. She won that derby race. I shouldn't tell you that. But it's an amazing story because their planes were sabotaged. I mean, I will say they were never able to prove it, but Sheinkin presents a lot of evidence that people were going along in the hangars at night and sabotaging the planes. There were so many bizarre things that happened. There was one pilot, her plane caught fire, and she was in the air, and she made an emergency landing, and there was a fire extinguisher in the cockpit, and it wouldn't come out. So she pulled it so hard that the apparatus holding it in the wall came out, the whole thing, and then she went to put it out, and the fire extinguisher didn't work. She opened up, she was so determined not to stop, and put the fire out with her bare hands, burning them severely. But as soon as the fire was out, she got into the plane and started flying again. They found evidence that somebody had dropped a cigarette into her baggage in the plane because they had to carry their clothes with them. And things like that would happen. Wings would fall apart, and you could see where the wires had not frayed but had been severed. The ladies didn't want that. The pilots did not want that to get into the press because they didn't want them to stop the race, but they knew they were being sabotaged. This book follows that race. It follows what happens to these characters, these people, not characters, living women, afterwards, and up until modern aviation. That part's brief, but it kind of draws you a fabulous book. I could not put it down.
Okay, I think I'm going to talk about these two together. So I have got Corpse Talk, Groundbreaking Women by Adam and Lisa Murphy. I think I mentioned this on our nonfiction one where we were just like, here's a bajillion nonfiction books. But a little bit more. Okay, so Corpse Talk is a series. There are two currently. There are more coming out, I think, later this year. Where our author uses himself, Adam Murphy, as a self-insert, and he is interviewing all of these dead people who are famous, some less so than others, which is awesome. And they're all corpses. Like, he's interviewing them and they're corpses. And I think this is, it might be scientists that has Marie Curie. That would make sense too. Because she's literally, she's got like a green outline around her. She's glowing because of the radiation that eventually killed her. But this follows, oh man, this covers so many. So we've got Hatshepsut, one of the very few female pharaohs. Oh man, there's so many people. Hypatia, who is a mathematician and philosopher. Irene of Athens, Empress of Byzantium. Kudalun, who was a wrestling princess. I believe she was related to Genghis Khan, if I remember correctly. Let's see, here she is. Maybe not that one, but she was a member of the Mongol people, yes. Joan of Arc, Elizabeth I. Julie Daubigny, who was a swashbuckler. Granny Nanny, who was a resistance fighter. Jane Austen, Ching She, who was a pirate queen. She's awesome. Princess Caribou, which I like because she was a con artist. She's it's great. Harriet Tubman.
We have a book in our collection called Bad Princesses. I was going to try to read it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Anti-heroes.
Yeah.
Fun.
Emily Davison, suffragette. Nellie Bly, journalist. She's also pretty awesome. Amy Johnson. I don't know if she's in your book, but she was also an aviator. Anne Frank. And then the last one is Josephine Baker, who I love. She and her banana dress. So I love it. It is just, it's so good. It's like, 4 or 5 pages, 6 for each person. So it doesn't go super in depth, but it does, you get more than you would in some of the little short biographies, and it is just delightful. Yeah, a little taste,
yeah.
Exactly. Similarly with Noisemakers, 25 women who raise their voices and change the world. This is a collection of comics from Kazoo magazine, which I am not terribly familiar with, but these are all great. So, this one, and I think most of you will recognize this art, Maris Wicks. She does a lot of science comics. They're all illustrated by different people, because they're all from different issues of the Kazoo magazine. But it is just, they're so pretty and colorful. It's a nice way also to just get all of these different artists. And Emily Warren Roebling, who was really cool. She helped finish the Brooklyn Bridge. Yeah. I think it was her husband and father, maybe. And some of the men in her family were the actual designers and architects and stuff.
On paper.
On paper. But then they all got deathly ill and were dying, and she was like, "I got this. No worries, we're gonna finish this bridge. It's cool." And so when it was done, she got to walk over it first because they were like, "Yeah, she really did a lot of the work." And Madam C.J. Walker, Maria Tallchief, and lots of other people, Josephine Baker's there too.
And it's such a rich world because these stories just haven't been told.
Yeah.
That women have not been given their place in history. And it's so many fascinating stories.
Yes, I love it. And so a fair amount of these are more well known, but not all of them. And they're just, so good. So good.
I'm going to hit my last piece of nonfiction. Okay. I want to finish up nonfiction. I'm going to go through the novels really fast. This book, The Girl Who Drew Butterflies, How Maria Marion's Art Changed Science. This is an example of a woman whose story has just, I never heard of her. It won the gold medal for the Seibert Award for Nonfiction, best piece of nonfiction for the year.
Last year?
I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. It's been a bit of time, and this book is by Joyce Sidman, who is a poet as well as a writer of nonfiction. So this book is really, it's so well done. Mm-hmm. It's got little poems that Sidman has written as well as her text. It's got photographs, but it's also filled with Maria Marion's art. Mm-hmm. And just briefly, Maria Marion lived in Germany in the 1600s. This was still during the period what's known as the Inquisition, where the church was very powerful. And they believed that a lot of things that women did was witchcraft, and they would be burned at the stake for that. And basically, if a woman stepped outside of any of the margins of the boundaries that were set for them by their European culture, they could be executed by being burned to death. It was horrible. Maria grew up in a family of artists in, I think it was Germany. I might just quick. Yeah, Frankfurt. And this was during the tulip craze. And people were so obsessed with tulips, they would spend their fortunes buying tulip bulbs. But her family were artists, and one of the ways that many artists made their living at that time, there were no printing presses yet, they hand illustrated catalogs. So her family illustrated tulip catalogs, but also did pictures of flowers, which were very popular then, and sold the paintings. Now Maria was raised, and at that time there were guilds. You could not have a business without being part of a guild, it was like a small maybe a union type thing. And there were certainly no female-headed businesses that were allowed into the guilds. And her family belonged to the art guild, and so she learned how to mix paint. She learned how to engrave the blocks for printing. She learned how to paint, and she became a very gifted artist in and of her own absolute right. And she helped to do the illustrations, and she married an artist, and together they had an art business. It was not a happy marriage. It ended in divorce. But then after she was divorced, it allowed her to really pursue her first passion, which was etymology, insects. She was fascinated by insects. And she was actually the person who discovered metamorphosis. She would watch these, at that time they thought butterflies just popped out of the mud. And she knew from silkworms that there was this thing that could happen where caterpillars would go in a cocoon, and then later moths would come out and lay eggs and make more caterpillars. But she was the one that watched. She kept meticulous records and observations and books and books and books and illustrated it all. And when she became an artist in her own right with her husband's business, whenever she drew flowers, and there are a lot of her illustrations in here, if I can find one. A lot of her illustrations, but whenever she drew the flowers, there was always an insect on her flower. And this was about the same time that Linnaeus was classifying, and there was a lot going on in science of classifying the animal kingdom. And they were looking at what made things different. Her contribution to science, in addition to uncovering metamorphosis, was seeing connections. She was interested in the connections and how nature wove itself together. So any of her illustrations of flowers and plants contained illustrations of the insects that lived in that plant. They were always scientifically accurate. Her insects the detail was scientifically perfect. And she is considered to be the mother of modern ecology. I never heard of her before. And if she had been doing this on her own, the danger was she risked being executed for trying to be an artist in her own right. She always had to work under the authority of a man. So I think that part's really interesting for us to know, and yet she still pursued her passions, facing great obstacles. So beautiful book, just gorgeous book. And the last one, History Smashers. And I'm only a third of the way through this book. I hope to get it finished.
Oh, it's so good.
History Smashers. I looked at Kelly yesterday and I said, she's smashing my mind with this history, because I have so many myths about history that are wrong.
We all do.
So true to truth. Ain't I a woman? I heard that in high school, that speech.
Oh, but she was very well educated.
But she did not ever say, ain't I a woman? She was very well educated. She was very articulate. She was a Danish. She spoke Danish. And so a lot of these stereotypes that we've grown up with about the history of women's rights in America, and then she makes the point early on that women all over the world have been in leadership positions in the past. You know, African women that were the head of their tribes, Native American women that with important positions of leadership. This was a particularly European thing, although there were monarchs in England, but that this oppression of women was not a worldwide thing, and it was really oppressive in America. It was awful. And the part where I am at is the thing that caused a lot of separation in the movement for women's rights in this country was the intersection with race. There are many black women that were involved in fighting for their rights as women, but also for rights as African Americans. And there were many white suffragettes that used race. They were very racist. They wanted to get support of white men and men in power. And they, even though they have been abolitionists, many of them were very racist, very anti-immigrant, to try to put and even Elizabeth Cady Stanton, there's a quote here, I would work with the devil himself if it would get me what I want. And it's been like, oh my gosh. So, sometimes we have to undo our heroes. They're complex people, they're human, but they also embrace some really awful things to get what they want. So I have a long way still to go in this book, but Kate Messner's done a beautiful job of undoing many of the myths that we embrace.
I want to say, oh yeah, this is in that book as well. I think it's definitely. Oh well, I think it is. It's definitely in Lifting as We Climb. But I love Ida B. Wells Barnett in one of the suffragist marches. They wouldn't let her march with the delegation from her state because of her the color of her skin, and she was like, "Well, that's stupid." So
when she got in the back of the, she marched.
She hid in the crowd and waited for her delegation to walk by, and then she jumped in with some of her friends and was like, "Ha ha ha!" I love it.
That's called intersectional feminism, and that's when you don't take just one issue. You don't just take feminism. You look at how women of color are uniquely oppressed. You look at how LGBTQ women are uniquely oppressed, and you pull them together rather than letting them split you apart. Really important.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, History Smashers. Mwah!
Excellent series. Just
Kate Messer.
So good.
I probably should have included this with the other two just then because it's also very similar. It is, again, a collective biography of women. This is by Marsha Williams. She's been around for ages. I had some of her books when I was a little kid. I think I probably got from the Scholastic Book Fair. And so her thing, I don't actually think she does it in this one. I think this is just straight up graphic novel. Yeah. So when she first started, well, she does it a little bit. She always includes stuff in the margins. And so sometimes a lot of her works it'll just be like a big picture in the center and then there are like little boxes around. This one is just like straight up graphic novel with cool asides on the edges. So yeah, this one definitely should have included this. But yeah, she's pretty awesome. She's done a ton of stuff. A couple of the Shakespeare plays and book on inventors and she's great. So I should have included that one. But this one includes some more modern ones like Malala's in here. So.
This one goes up to Stacey Abrams. I love that Stacey Abrams is in this book.
Oh.
Once you finish with nonfiction, I'm going to say like one sentence about each of these novels.
Okay, yeah. So my last two, Kamala Harris, Madam Vice President, first African American, first Indian American, first woman Vice President. Yeah. So it's kind of a big deal. So this one skews a little younger. Kamala Harris, Rooted in Justice by Nikki Grimes and illustrated by Laura Freeman. It is gorgeous. It starts out with a little girl and her grandmother, and the little girl comes home from school and is like, the teacher asked me what I wanted to be, and I said president. And one of my boy classmates laughed at me, and the grandmother's like, And so she tells her the story of Kamala Harris. So it's really cute. It does skew younger, but it's good. It's actually quite wordy. I was surprised. And then also
sometimes those picture books, they're just worth it just to look at the pictures. They're so beautiful. I love them.
Who is Kamala Harris? This is the first Who book that I've read. I get it. They're really fun. They're real quick reads. Real good. This one is much skinnier than most of the other ones, but as Mary Lou and I discussed, I mean, she's still alive. She's still doing lots and lots of stuff.
She's just getting started.
She's relatively young, so there's not a whole lot of information that they could have contained in this, but it is delightful. There were two little tidbits that I shared with you the other day that I was laughing at. One of them I loved that when she actually moved to Canada when she was a child, and there it is. In her apartment building, they were not allowed to play soccer in the grassy area around the apartment, and she and her sister thought that was unfair, and so they protested outside the building with signs and stuff, and the apartment manager saw them and changed the rules. It's like, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's good. And of course, the illustrations are nice too. Yeah. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'm aware we've been going on a long time. I'm going to be really quick, but I want to show you 3 historical fiction novels that have great strong characters. One Came Home by Amy Timberlake. I love this novel. I've read it several times. Newbery honor book. Takes place right after the Civil War. Georgie is a 13-year-old girl living with her father. Her father went out to hunt for gold and he never came home. Lives with her grandfather and mother and sister. They have a general store, and Georgie's dream is to never marry and inherit this store and run it with her sister, who she loves a lot. Her sister's like 16. And she one day sees her sister, she's being courted by two men, kissing the boy that is not the boy that she's supposed to be marrying. And so she goes and tells the man, who's the hotel owner, that she saw her sister kissing this boy, because she wants to mess up all these relationships so that they can just run this store together. Well, her sister disappears. Her sister runs away because she has a fight with the guy she's supposed to marry and all this stuff. Anyway. The sheriff goes to look for her, and all he finds is her body. He finds her sister, who has long red hair, wearing the dress that her sister left in, but her face has been shot off. They think they're sure it's her. But Georgie's not so sure, and she goes on her own journey to find, it's sort of a mystery, to find out what happened to her sister. The beauty of the book is this character. She is just a spitfire. She's not afraid of anything, but she learns that there are things to be afraid of.
Yeah, yes, there are.
Resistance by Jennifer Nielsen, who I love. This is about a young woman who is Jewish, but she is blonde, and she looks Gentile, so she puts a cross around her neck and gets involved in the resistance. Smuggling people in and out of the ghettos, smuggling in food. Many of the characters in this book are based on real people and certainly real events. It's just outstanding, as all of her stuff is. And finally, this is one I just read. This is brand new. This is called Brother's Keeper, and this is about the Korean Civil War. And this book starts off in 1950. And North Korea was very oppressive to girls and women. The main character, Sora, is 12, and she's very smart and wants to be a teacher or a scholar, and her mother is, no, you are going to marry and you're going to drop out of school now and learn how to take care of babies and houses. And then the war breaks out, and her family decides to escape to the south, where her mother has a brother. But very soon after they evacuate, there's bombing, and she gets separated from her parents, and it appears that her parents have been killed. And she's left with her 9-year-old brother, who she has to carry several hundred miles on foot to try to get out of North Korea and down to their family that's down on the tip of South Korea. It's a harrowing novel. This I would recommend only for ages 10 and up, just because it has a lot about the horrors of war. It's not extremely graphic, but it's not light. But this girl, she's amazing. She is just such a heroine, and such a just her strength. And this is based on the author's mother's story, so based on real facts. And that just such great stuff. Please come and ask us for suggestions, or read these books. They're really good, and you'll get a much better, bigger picture of what the history of women has been about.
There's so much.
In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about sports books.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
March Madness.
Yes. Yes. We're already doing the reading. I'm enjoying it so much.
Yeah. Putt golf. As a preview for you.
Fencing. I'm reading a book about fencing now, so yeah.
Yeah. So stay safe.
2 weeks from now. We'll see
ya.
ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye.